You are listening to the Overfunctioning Podcast Chat Sessions, connecting leadership concepts and local leaders. Hello, friends. I'm Alex McMahon, and today I'm here with Mark Treen.
What's up?
And Mark is a good friend of mine. We've known each other for a while now, actually to the days of Kent State, in which we were lab partners. And
oh, I forgot about that.
Mark I specifically, just a little story with Mark before we jump into what is leadership. There was this experiment which you weren't supposed to put this like cork on the top of this test tube. Mark was like, "Oh, we're doing it." And just rammed it down there, like popped off and hit the ceiling. And then I remember him like digging around, finding it and putting it right back on. We had a good time. So, and then that transitioned into Mark is actually assistant principal at Stow-Munroe Falls High School. He's been there for 12 years, 6 years as a principal. He got his master's in organizational leadership. He's expecting his first child with Kelly, who he's been with for 6 years, and expecting Madeline here in
September.
Madeline, right?
Yeah, Madeline,
in September. So Mark and I go back quite a bit, and I thought he'd be great to be on the podcast because he's got a different perspective, especially, with John and Zach. Well, more John and I, we have a lot of different perspective with students, and so does Mark, but he brings a different perspective when it comes to parents. And a lot of people are parents, and how they deal with their children, and there's a lot of leadership that involves in that. And so, Mark, big question here. What is leadership?
Actually, it's kind of funny that you bring up the parent stuff, because all I've been thinking about, obviously, for the last 32 weeks is basically, like, what type of parent am I going to be? And that's allowed me to add a different layer of who I am as a person. But when you talk about what is leadership, I think I can go in a lot of different ways. But I think what I would say, what is leadership, is taking everyone's collective why, and like Simon Sinek, right? Mm-hmm. The collective why, and making it fit into a how.
Okay.
Because everyone has different motivations, and everyone thinks that like how to go about things are like kind of, you can navigate it differently, but the end goal is the same. So it's like the process of how to get everyone going in the right direction, while acknowledging everyone has a why. Mm-hmm.
So how do you get there? How have you found the best way to navigate those waters when trying to get everybody go on the same direction to get to that same endpoint?
It's kind of funny, because you think of in leadership like management and leadership, or manager and leader. And I think initially I was more focused on managing, like day to day, like am I surviving, versus like leadership, which is like more that collective vision outward, like looking forward. But I think, how do I navigate every stakeholder and how they go about like their day-to-day interactions, is just staying connected with people. I think at work the running joke is like, where's Mark? And like my office is always empty, and I kind of do that on purpose, because when I'm in my office, I'm not connected. And when I'm out of my office into my stakeholder areas, teachers, kids, even parents or whatever, I can stay connected. Because, as we've talked about before, when you have to go motivate someone, or you have to go have a tough dialogue with someone, like it's easier and it's more effective when people are coming towards you instead of moving away from you. And to get them to come towards you, you have to stay connected to them.
Yeah, for sure. Early on, when you were assistant principal, is there a point to where you I remember talking to you about this, and you said, as soon as I started out as assistant principal, I was like thrown in this office. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, and it was just like floundering around. How did you transition to a point to where you found yourself getting out of the office and understanding things more on the side of leadership on this end?
It took, it was just talking to other people. And it was like I was very unique, because here I am, I graduated from Kent in '06. I student teach, at Stow High School, and the department liked me enough to kind of recommend me to HR, and HR came down, and there was an opening, and like here I am, student teacher, and then I, kind of matriculate into like this leadership role. Yeah. Which was, in a sense, a vacuum that summer. It was really crazy. And what makes me different, though, is I utilize my relationships with my peers, like yourself and John Moyer. Yeah. And I think about like even Amanda and Chris. But I utilize all those established relationships initially to then get some criticism. And but also some like, hey, what have you seen? Asking people like, what have you seen done effectively, and like, how can I do that? And like, so it's taking like those bits and pieces of those conversations and like putting them all together in like a pot, and then like after I'd say about like year 2 or even like year 3, probably year 3 is when I was like, okay, no, I got this. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love this part of criticism, asking for criticism. What was that like, and how do you suggest people do that? Because that is not something that comes real easy. Like, hey, please tell me what I'm doing wrong. For some people, I know like myself, who's like a do-gooder, and like I love to do that. And we had a principal at Stow, Kathy Thomas, who I felt like if I was going to go to anybody to do that, I would have asked her. But like, let's say that's not something you usually do. Like, how do you get into that? Like, what do you do, and is that uncomfortable? Tell me about that.
For me, it's very comfortable because I think that's what makes me unique. Yeah. Is I'm in a constant state of reflection. I mean, I don't want to sell anyone else short, but I think my level in which I want to improve, not only personally, spiritually, in my relationship with Kelly, now as a father, as a friend, is pretty significant. So I look for that criticism. But also, I have this weird, and I think this is actually it's actually more of a weakness. I need affirmation. Okay. Yeah. And I hate that fact that I need affirmation, and that's dwindled over time as I become more confident myself. Mm-hmm. So initially I was looking for this affirmation, and through that, hey, I'm affirming you, oh, by the way, do this. And so how would I instruct someone to kind of get into that mind frame is I would first ask them, like, what are they convicted about? Yeah. Like, what are your convictions? And where are you relevant to those convictions? Mm-hmm. And if you don't have congruency between those two items, then that's going to be your reflection to get there. If you are, if your convictions are who you are, then you start saying, okay, how can I get better? Yeah.
Interesting. So I'm just trying to think, when you were talking about convictions and you were talking about the right thing, when it comes to somebody and developing those convictions, I know that you have strong convictions, and is that something that you would suggest that somebody, this principled life, is that something that you would encourage anybody as a leader to do? Or, how, kind of talk about that a little bit, I guess.
I guess if you are, so I'm tasked on a daily basis I'm the law and order guy for 1,800 kids, whether, that's, I like it or not. Like, I'm a disciplinarian, so I have 1,800 kids and I have 110 teachers. So when I say I, the collective, we as a team. If you don't know who you are, how can you lead 105 teachers and 1,800 kids to a collective goal? Yeah. And so I think you need to have peace of who you are and what you're about before you can even step into an effective leadership role. Yeah.
How do you get there? How did you do it? Like, you know what I mean? Where did that come from? How did Mark Treen know his convictions well? Like, obviously this is a process. This is a lifelong journey of doing this, but like, that was developed somewhere. How did that happen?
Actually, I think for me, that is, as I reflect back in my life, and I think about who I am as a person, I think I was primed, whether you believe in a higher being or God or whatever, but like certain things happened in my life to emphasize who I am today. And so I can think as far back as, when you're young, it's what are you involved with? Are you playing sports? Are you in band? Are you in choir? And for me, I found out I wasn't athletic really, really fast. My parents encouraged me, but my parents really pushed me into Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
And when I was in Boy Scouts, Boy Scouts number one, their number one mission is to develop boys into men and into leaders as well. And so as I reflect back through my life, I think just my life has been kind of a set of circumstances to get me to this point that I have evolved from, like this kid who wanted to be, an all-star like left-handed shooting guard on a high school basketball team, to getting into college and saying like, no, I really want to be a principal, having no clue how to get there, so I'm going to teach. And then when I become a teacher, like, I don't really know what they do, but I still want to be I found myself consumed with the larger picture. And then it just kind of all happened. And so then here I am. Wow.
Yeah. So what part did your parents play in that, do you think?
100%. Like when I think about like the value of education and like, is it the school's part? Is it the parents' part? It's a balanced approach, but I think there more is with parents. And my parents were all about, like, my dad was all about math, science, and engineering. My dad did a good job of kind of like wielding the big stick, but also like telling me he he was the disciplinarian guy, but he also
Cat dogs, no big deal. Mailman came.
Every day at the same time. Anyways, so when I think about like my dad kind of instilled this belief that you can be disciplined, but you can also like love someone. Yeah. And so then when I look at my mom was like this. She was like the strong one in the relationship. So you put that all together, and I think they just like how they parented me, just was they loved me. But they also developed my core values, and they also pushed me in the direction that they thought was best. And I think that just comes from like a stable household. And I'm very fortunate to come from the Treens.
Yeah. So now you've seen that, and you also interact with a lot of different parents at school. And so, how does that change? So, like, if somebody doesn't have a good leadership in the home, how does that affect a student? How does that affect somebody growing up? How do you feel about that? Like, what does that look like?
Well, and I don't want to be disrespectful to people, not saying like if you come you have to have a perfect home life and to be a leader, and that's absolutely not the point. But when you talk about what is a principal's role in high school? People say it's all discipline, and really it's being the firefighter and the utility person for an at-risk population. And a lot of those kids are they have complicated home lives, and so what you do a lot is you do a lot of listening and you do a lot of coaching and teaching to the kid. But the same thing with the parents, though, is like you let them yell. Yeah. And like people say, oh, you're weak for letting them yell at you. You're like, no. You kind of like let them, like Kathy Thomas said to me, like, never never like take it disrespectfully that a parent is coming in there like saying like, no, like I want this issue hammered out, because what they're doing right now is they think that they are acting in the best interest of the child. And so it's like navigating that whole circumstance to get them to de-escalate, so step down transformer, and then start talking about facts and feeling. And keep the feelings out of it. Because they're coming in here and saying, I feel like the world's against me. I feel like that teacher is out to get me. I feel like your school is blah, 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 blah. And then you just kind of like, that's what you hear out, and then you just come with facts. And you just say, hey, this is what we can do. Present options. Yeah. And it starts to work itself out. So, as I work with students as a freshman and parents, by the time that they're seniors, when they're a senior, the conversations aren't as like explosive as they were when they were freshmen. And part of it is they've realized that, okay, he has a role. That role is being an assistant principal, which provides discipline or provides instructional strategies and leadership to the building. I'm going to respect that.
Yeah, and you're not out to get them.
Oh, absolutely not.
the biggest thing,
Like that's the biggest fallacy of being an assistant principal is, I was sitting at Corner Cup and talking to a gentleman, to a former student and a current student, and and they're like really good kids, and I'm like, man, I really miss this. And like, so a goal of mine now is to like really like good, quote unquote, good kids. They have no clue that an assistant principal can help them out too.
Yeah.
And they only say, well, you're just for the bad kids. And it's just like, no. I'm here for the kids who just make mistakes.
Yeah.
So, my goal is to try to get, all students to know who I am as a person, not just a stereotype.
Yeah. Could you give an example? Because I've seen, and obviously we're not using names here, but because I've seen you work with certain students and then them just over the 4 years just changing over time. Could you give an example of a certain student that you worked a lot of time with and what that looked like down the line and how that changed them over time? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let me think of a good. I just like. There's been so many of them, and like that's the cool part is like just like as I reflect back, like if like by no means am I like the end all be all, but I played an important role, and I think of one student in particular, and like this student had a highly volatile home situation, and was up on the expulsion table twice, within his first 2 years, and he and I just kind of developed a bond, and we laughed a lot. We yelled at each other a lot. Like he yelled at me, and there's times I had to like kind of let him know like, hey, this is what's going on, and it wasn't until his senior year when kind of like the reality of like, okay, I need to graduate. He took like this step in the right direction, and I thought we were good. And I was like, all right, like this is gonna be. And I took a lot of flack for this student. Like other students would give me flack for it. Like, well, you're bending the rules for this guy. Other teachers would say, this student needs to be, needs to have like larger discipline scenarios. And I just kept on staying like connected with him.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't want to stay connected to his parents at times, I stayed connected to his parents. And it hurt at times because it was really uncomfortable. And I'll never forget, it was the last day of school, and I'm walking in at literally at 11:30, and I see the student walking out, and I jokingly say, hey, hope I never see you again, because I have like this relationship with him. Yeah. And he's like exploding, and I quickly realize that like this is the last day of school. He thinks he's graduating. Something happened. Oh boy. So I literally told him to take a walk around the parking lot. If he wants to graduate, meet me back in my office in 10 minutes. Yeah. And something happened with a teacher, and I ended up for 2 hours, like I felt like I negotiated with the teacher to get her in a spot to where I supported her, but also I was coming for helping that student out. And his last 2 hours of his high school career we spent in basically like a small group tutoring room, and I was like basically going through this last 25 problems of the class, and he was trying to buck me, and I was just like, no, we're going to do this, and he was telling me how to do it and how to solve everything. Well, fast forward, we get to we get to graduation, and we get him through that day, and we get him to graduation, and it was just like kind of like when he walked across the stage, I kind of looked at him, and smiled. He smiled back, and like that was it. Yeah. And to me, like that student in particular, like that student and his parents, like I can say I helped him out. Yeah. But I think equally, they changed me as a leader.
Yeah. And I think the obvious question here would be to ask, why did you did so much for this kid. Like why did Mark Treen do that?
Because we're in public ed. Like why? Who else? Like if it's not me, who's it gonna be? And to me, where I've landed upon these sticky issues is it's all about economic development. And if it's just not worth seeing a young person without a diploma sitting on the couch of their parents' house at age 19. No. the stats are staggering. The success of that student is going to be like this. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's all about that economic conversation, because if I can get them a diploma, that means that I at least got them to that. People talk about how everyone has like the same begin and end date, and but how fast we raced depends on who we are. And to me, it was like I got them to that end goal that was like the bare minimum. And so that's the way I look at it. So I'm okay with kind of like if I need to make a parent. If I need to tell a parent like what they don't want to hear, I'm okay with that, because that's my end goal. Mm-hmm. If I potentially have to have a difficult conversation with a fellow colleague, a teacher, I'm okay with that too, because this is where my heart is coming from. Yeah. And eventually we'll come back to it. As if I ask a teacher like, hey, I need you to do this, we'll come back and say, hey, here's why I did that. Mm-hmm. And as long as it's within the ethical guidelines of the profession, it's okay. Yeah. So why not push?
Yeah. It's like, it's like, we've talked about this before, is if you can raise the maturity level of somebody else, especially in a situation, that volatile situation, we've read studies, and we know this, that will only increase the maturity of whatever system they're in, with that family, wherever they're at. And so if you can go ahead and if you can do that with a student, that means that next generation that's coming through, the maturity level you would assume, as long as they continue to develop as a person, would in turn be at a higher maturity level than when it first started.
And take that from a Summit County perspective. Mm-hmm. You increase the maturity of the county, and the county gets better. Yeah. The region gets better, and so on and so forth. But take one more step back. If that student likely is going to be a voter, they're most likely not going to leave the city. Yeah. So if they want to vote for our levies, if they have a negative, this is the way I think about it. I want them to have a positive interaction, at least for one person, to say like, hey, that person had my back. And then when they do have a family and they have a child, and probably that child's going to be in the principal's office, instead of that student, now the parent, saying don't trust that leader, say, man, there was maybe you should give that principal, you should listen to that principal, because I had a principal back when I was your age, and this is where he helped me get there. And so I think I'm okay with that gamble.
Yeah, the maturity, just building that maturity it's almost selfish in some ways. I don't, when I go into my classroom, or you go as a principal, you're not thinking, well, I'm doing this because then they'll stay in Stow and then it'll make my life easier. You're not thinking that, but in the end, it kind of does. I mean, if you can raise the maturity level of that classroom, of that school, of that whatever, then things get easier. It gets more fun. People are more laid back, and people can be more jovial, and the anxiety levels tend to go down because of that.
And it goes back to the how and the why. You can focus in on the how and the why, and more specifically your why. Because if you realize why you're there, then your rate of burnout, your instructional mindset, it's all gonna be you're gonna be operating at a higher efficiency level. And so it all just kind of, for me, it makes sense. For other people, not really. And I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm.
So you have to be, as a leader. You have to be.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because if they're not there yet, they're not gonna. There's not all of a sudden going to happen. And another this is another podcast all on itself. But that whole why, super important, so important when it comes to leadership. And if everybody's a leader, which I believe that everybody is a leader, because they influence somebody somewhere. Knowing your why is going to help you figure out the decisions you make and why you make them.
Well, that's funny that you say that, because you talk about everyone's a leader, and some people would think that no, leadership's not for me, and I'm like, you're a leader, and so what's the difference between me 7 years ago and now is my classroom's 1,800 kids, and I interact with maybe 30 of them. And now, and it used to be my classroom was 30 kids, and I interacted like on a daily basis. I interacted with like 5 or 6 each period. It's not like I had 100% engaged. Like I talked to every single kid every day. Like no, you had passive learners and active learners. So it's the same thing, but the scale is just much larger. But like I said, like I used to teach physics, and now I just teach life.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, it has been awesome having you on, and our time is up. And so, Mark, it'd be great to have you on again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
This stuff is so good to talk about, and I think it's helpful just for me and you to discuss it. And if anybody else gets anything out of it, awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
If not, hey, we had a good conversation. So.
Absolutely, man. Thanks.
Yep.